So for those who don't know, me and a few other animation reviewers are doing a week of sports-centered videos. So today, I'll be making a list on one of America's favorite sports, football. American football. Thank you. Now, despite football being on a steady decline in recent years, it's still a sport that brings a lot of families together. And for most Americans, it's one of their longest-running Sunday traditions. And with tons of movies, shows, and even now politics being centered around it, it's no surprise that there'd be tons of great cartoon episodes centered around it. And some of them are much deeper than just being a football-centered episode. Now, I'm only including episodes from animated shows on this list, so classics like the goofy short How to Play Football aren't gonna be on here. Though, I think a list on the best Goofy shorts is overdue at this point. So, if and when I make that, you can expect to see it there. And if there's a football-centered episode you feel should be on this list that isn't, well, it's more than likely because I haven't seen it. So, feel free to recommend it to me and maybe I'll make a future review on it. Anyway, let's not waste any more time. This is the top 10 best American football episodes. Mud Bowl from Hey Arnold. Yeah, well, of course the show with the football-headed main character was gonna have an episode on this list. Now, Hey Arnold does a great job working morals into episodes that you wouldn't expect to find morals. But when it comes to their sports episodes, aside from a few, they're mostly just straightforward, fun sports episodes. Like this episode, which is about the 4th graders and 5th graders agreeing to a football match, and Helga ends up taking the quarterback position from Arnold, and she runs the 4th graders into the ground by trying to make them more physical, instead of playing to their strength of being the smarter team.
Let's run some drills! Drink!
Now, one thing I like that this episode does that a lot of other kid-centered sports episodes don't really do is it shows off a slightly different side of the sport that a kid might not even think about. Most kids, I feel, don't realize that sometimes to be successful at a sport, and this especially rings true about football, you need to outsmart your opponent just as much as outplay them. And this episode shows that off pretty nicely. Other than that, it's really just a straightforward football episode. It's a lot of fun, it can be intense at times, and like most kid show-centered sports episodes, it finds a fun way to make sure the good guys come out on top.
I got it! Ow.
Every Which Way But Loose from American Dad. Now, I know a lot of people view American Dad as the less funny version of Family Guy, and it is, but it's also the smarter version of Family Guy, at least when it comes to getting a message across. This episode is about Steve wanting to make Stan proud of him by joining the football team, but when Stan cuts him, Steve and Roger devise a plan to get back at him by forming their own football team, in a very Bad News Bear style way, which is handled really well. And when Steve and Roger succeed in beating Stan's team, Stan tries killing himself, which he reveals is because he doesn't know how to accept losing. So Steve tries to help Stan get over it by, well, teaching him how to let his emotions out naturally.
I just cry and get over it. That's what life is, Dad. Losing and crying. You lose one time and you go straight to hanging yourself.
In a way, this is a satirical portrayal of really any sports fan. But despite that, it still takes the message of suicide really, well, seriously. Yeah, unlike another infamous Seth MacFarlane episode.
Hey, Lois, if I was going to kill myself, do I slit my wrists this way or this way?
Sideways for attention, long way for results.
Mega's right.
Okay, I'll be in the garage.
You know, the more I watch American Dad and then watch Family Guy, it really seems like Seth is trying to get Family Guy canned at this point, because there seems to be a much better staff behind American Dad. Hell, even their dark jokes feel more well thought out.
Go with those feelings. You know, let them out.
Out of my neck?
No, out of your eyes.
Yeah, it's dark, but It also perfectly fits the theme of the episode, and it still makes it clear that it doesn't actually view suicide itself as funny, but more the dark aspect of the topic funny. And on top of that, it doesn't even feel that out of place. Unlike just randomly giving you straight up advice on how to end yourself and calling it a dark joke. Now, while football isn't the main theme per se of this episode, it's still a sizable amount of the episode, and it is used to transition nicely into a very serious topic that, once again, is tackled pretty admirably. And that's something about American Dad in general that I've always respected about it. And it still manages to get a really fun closing football game that seems to have been somewhat inspired by the basketball scene from Flubber. So, even if you care more about the football aspects and not necessarily the suicidal message aspects, this is still a great episode to settle those interests.
Look at this. We're having a father-son moment.
Quit ruining it!
That stinking feeling from Recess. Now, I haven't talked about Recess really at all since I started my channel, and that's something that might have to change soon because this is a pretty good show with a lot of helpful advice for its young viewers. Now, football isn't exactly the focus of this episode, but it is still a well-used tool to go over its actual focus, first crushes. During a football game between the 4th and 5th graders, why is that suddenly giving me deja vu? The 5th graders make a kid named Johnny their quarterback after Spinelli knocks the other one out. And when Spinelli is about to sack Johnny, she suddenly stops, resulting in the 5th graders winning. And Spinelli reveals she's feeling a little sick, which her mom reveals to her is because she's experiencing her first crush. And when her friends figure this out, the snitch, Randall, ends up overhearing it and blabs it to the whole school, resulting in everyone viewing Spinelli in a different light, including her friends. This episode does a great job showing how a kid acts when they get their first crush. They feel different and they have trouble being themselves again. And I like how this episode portrayed that by using Spinelli in this. In fact, it seems like Spinelli is their go-to character for really any girl message episode they have. And there's even a heartwarming moment between Spinelli and the typical mean teacher, Miss Finster, where she explains why these feelings are actually a good thing to have, and it's best to accept them.
Even if he does leave you in Paris with no money and a broken axle on the VW, in the end it's all worth it. 'Cause it's better to feel something than nothing at all.
Damn, that might even be a slight little message about not being a sociopath. And this talk motivates Spinelli to go back to being herself, not letting her feelings get in the way of who she actually is.
What about your condition? My condition has nothing to do with playing football. Now let's do it!
Now, like I said, while it's not exactly a football-themed episode, it's still used as an acceptable tool, and a reminder that you could experience your early bout with puberty at virtually any moment. Doug's Big Feet from Doug. It seems like Doug always gets a negative rep for being a, well, more slower show than most other Nickelodeon and Disney shows. But I personally always enjoyed this show because I always viewed it in a different light. It seems like a show that's working off of fantasies most high school students have, but it's going a different route with them by basically showing what would most likely happen if those fantasies ever came true. And this episode is a good example of that. It's about Doug practicing football kicks with Skeeter, and after dozens of terrible tries, Doug finally nails a field goal, which is the only kick of Doug's noticed by the football coach, who instantly makes Doug the team's new place kicker. And since Doug isn't a good place kicker and only got a lucky kick, he's forced to try and teach himself how to place kick.
I practiced for hours, but it looked more and more like that one great kick was just a total accident.
And it of course doesn't help that the coach keeps labeling Doug the team's secret weapon.
You don't scare me, Barney. I got my own secret weapon right here. The boy with the golden toe.
And this is what I mean when I say this show is showing what would happen if your fantasies actually came true. There are teens everywhere who want to be the school's big sports star, but you know if that moment was given to them and they never really played before, it would be a living nightmare. And that's how most of these episodes seem to go. Though, of course, the show does find creative ways to make sure Doug still comes out okay from all of this. Which I still kinda like, because you are always left wondering how this character is gonna save himself. And the solutions are always creative yet still make sense. Even if you're not a fan of this show, I still think a lot of football fans would have a soft spot in their heart for this episode. Sweet Smell of Excess from King of the Hill. So I'll be honest, this episode was not my first choice to include from the show, hence why it's a bit lower on the list. I initially wanted to put Bills Are Made to Be Broken, which would have easily been in the top 3 on this list. But I ended up having so much to say about it that I decided to give it its own video, which I'll put out in the near future. And with that being said, this is still a very humorous and relatable episode to anyone who's a big football fan. Or, hell, even someone who knows a big football fan. When Bobby takes up a liking for football, Hank wants to guarantee Bobby will like it forever, so he takes him to a college game between Texas and Nebraska, and some of the best football fan-centered hijinks happens that I would say captures every single fan stereotype flawlessly. First off, this is another satirical portrayal of football fans, because both Hank and Peggy are portrayed as the two most popular types of football fans, with Peggy being the crazy one, and Hank being the superstitious one. And I think it's a nice little commentary on football fans, specifically on Hank's part, because I never really viewed him as a guy who would believe in supernatural elements.
The Longhorns were doing terrible, and the momentum shifted right when we got here. We've got mojo on our side now.
But that's what's funny about sports. It can turn anyone superstitious. Hell, even when you see commercials centered around football fans, a lot of them poke fun at those stereotypes.
That's a hole! I hate watching with Ramsey, but every time he's come over this year, we've won. I love you, Ramsey.
Also, this episode paints a fan experience that, well, maybe a little far-fetched, still seems very plausible. Bobby ends up sneaking into an unused luxury box, and eventually Hank and his friends migrate to it. But it ends up being a personal box for a famous former Nebraska player, which puts all of them in a tough predicament because they end up being called on to call the last play of the game. I'm just gonna stop right there, because everything after that is so perfectly executed that it needs to be seen. While I still wouldn't call it one of the best King of the Hill episodes, it's still an episode I'd recommend to the newest football fans.
Is it okay that I feel like I don't want to live anymore?
Yes, Bobby, that's normal.
Now, in keeping with football's tradition of having a great halftime show, I feel this video deserves something just like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the Bikini Bottom Super Band! Oh, screw you, Viacom, ruining my halftime show! Sarcastaball from South Park. Now, with the NFL becoming more than just a football organization and instead being at the center of many health controversies, it's no surprise that eventually South Park was going to poke fun at all of that. In this episode, after Randy finds out that South Park Elementary banned kickoffs in their football games, he goes to a PTA meeting and, in a very sarcastic fashion, he starts saying they should ban virtually everything about football and instead turn it into a new sport he calls Sarcastaball.
See, while we're at it, we'll have a balloon instead of a ball, and whoever catches the balloon tries to run while all the other players hug.
And despite Randy not being serious about anything he's saying, the school likes his idea and even make him the coach of their new Sarcastaball team. And on top of that, Randy ends up becoming a leader to make Sarcastaball a nationwide sport. Now, one thing I appreciate about this episode is that, in typical South Park fashion, it kind of gives its 2 cents about if it's possible to make football safer, by basically saying that if you keep toning down football, eventually you might as well just make a new sport altogether, because everything that made football what it used to be is basically being thrown out in an attempt to make it safer. And on top of that, the episode isn't really trying to deny that there are health issues with football. In fact, what's clever about this episode is that it's trying to say no matter how much you tone it down, football is still going to be dangerous. In fact, even when it is toned down to the safest sport it can possibly be, there still ends up being health issues, just in a different form.
Randy, something's happened. Are you unable to stop being sarcastic?
Oh, right. I can't stop being sarcastic now.
I'm telling you, Randy, I think this sport is doing something to your brain.
Honestly, at this point, the NFL is an easy target for any form of criticism, which makes it a walk in the park for a show like South Park. It makes creative jokes about NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell's denial of any health issues, it chimes in on the debate on if it's actually possible to make football safer, and there are some nice little shots at that travesty that was the replacement referees. It's just another episode of South Park making fun of everything it can in its naturally crude, yet still well-portrayed style.
Do you mean that?
Yes, I totally mean it. Help me, Sharon.
Operation Leader from Codename Kids Next Door. Codename Kids Next Door, like Recess, is another show I really should be talking more about, because it's one of those shows that's really a lot smarter than you would think. Now, its style was something like if mischievous kids actually had reasons to do certain things they do, and this episode has no shortage of that as it works in football in a very different way than any of these other episodes. It's about Number One's girlfriend, Lizzie, hijacking his mission to spy on the football team. And when Number One finds out about it, he tries to catch up with her, not realizing she's taken a few breaks to treat the team. So when he actually infiltrates the school's football team, he finds out they're actually planning an assault on their moon base and are being led by former Kids Next Door operative Chad. Now, what makes this episode stand out to me is the way it works in football cliches and uses them instead for an all-out battle instead of a sports game. Also, there are some jokes here and there that I don't know if I should applaud them for being so subtly awesome or groan at them because they're jokes very few, if any, kids are gonna get. Like, for example, when Number 4 scores a touchdown, for one quick moment he does the icky shuffle. Not the Cupid shuffle, the Icky shuffle. It was a dance that Icky Woods, a fullback from the late 80s, invented and would dance every time he scored a touchdown. And it was quite popular at the time. Even today, there are a lot of Bengal fans who can remember the exact step.
Wow! You actually bored him to sleep!
Oh, screw off. Also, the teenagers have a football-shaped bomb that they plan on using to destroy the moon base, which is actually really clever considering, like in any sport, the ball is the exact thing that can make or break you. And during the climactic battle, the kids use tons of trick plays to beat the teams, which is exactly what happens in virtually any football-centered kids film. But like most Kids Next Door episodes, these cliches are put to great use because they're used in subtle, out-of-the-box ways, which is so hard not to appreciate. Honestly, looking back on this show, I dare even say it's kind of underrated.
I'd love to hang out with you guys and have a ball, but I don't have one!
Patriot Games from Family Guy. This is one of my favorite episodes of Family Guy. Not exactly top 10, but certainly top 20. It's about Peter going to a school reunion and being discovered by superstar quarterback Tom Brady, who asks Peter to become the Patriots' new center. But being a football star instantly goes to Peter's head, and he makes a complete mockery out of the team, resulting in the Patriots trading him to the worst football team in England. Piss off. This is another episode that utilizes cliches in a great way, but instead of utilizing cliches with the sport of football, it more utilizes the cliches of football superstars. First off, it portrays Tom Brady as, well, just a normal guy. He's not chauvinistic, he doesn't brag about himself, and he's completely against showboating. Of course, a lot of football fans will tell you that's a false portrayal, but I'm not gonna chime in on that. But on the other end of the spectrum, Peter is acting like the kind of football superstars who can't actually handle the fame. He's always showing off, he's looking for any reason to make himself the center of attention. He's just a cocky asshole.
What do you think, eh? I got this for doing that car dealership ad. All right, enough messing around, huh? Let's play this game. Let's play some football.
Also, while I know playing yourself sounds easy, you'd be surprised how hard that can be for most people who aren't actually trained. But I would say Brady does a good job here. I mean, his character gets put in some weird situations, and he actually does a decent job sounding like he's actually in these situations. Though, every now and then he does also kind of sound like Beast Boy from Teen Titans Go.
Damn it, Griffin! I said no showboating!
I said I'm lost, fool!
But let's be honest, there are two things people most remember this episode for. In fact, they're probably the most memorable scenes in Family Guy history. Brian losing a bet to Stewie, and Stewie beating the ever-loving crap out of him on multiple occasions, and Peter's hilarious little cover of Shapoopy from The Music Man.
Shapoopy, Shapoopy, Shapoopy.
The girl who's hard to get.
Shapoopy, Shapoopy, Shapoopy.
But you can win her yet.
It's also pretty impressive how much funny imagery they were able to stuff into this one scene. Like penalty flags being used as that fountain water cliche. Little things like that really add to the enjoyability of this scene. But whatever it is you remember the most from this episode, I think it's safe to say it's one of the better football episodes out there.
That's a winner in my book.
Bart Starr from The Simpsons. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise that The Simpsons have a football episode, but what's actually surprising is how few football episodes they have. I can only think of two right off the top of my head, Sunday Cruddy Sunday and Bart Starr. And Bart Starr is easily my favorite of the two. It's about the kids of Springfield all failing their fitness tests, so their parents sign them up for Pee Wee football, and Bart's team is coached by Ned Flanders, which results in Homer driving Flanders so crazy with insulting him that Flanders quits and gives the job to Homer, who runs the team into the ground by making Bart the new quarterback over the team's best player, Nelson. Now this episode, first off, has some really smart jokes, like when Lisa says she wants to join the team clearly in order to make a statement, and being crushed when she finds out that the league already has no issues whatsoever letting girls play.
But we'd love to have you on board.
Well, football's not really my thing.
This is something I'm actually going to bring up again later in the video. It's also got some hilarious jokes about childhood obesity that don't go overboard trying to be cruel, and it still manages to work in a great message about parental support. Like, when Homer first takes over, you expect him to get carried away with torturing Bart, as well as show him very little support. And while the episode initially makes you think it's going to go down that route, it actually ends up being the complete opposite. Homer thinks back to how his dad never supported his sports career and always made him feel like a failure, that he decides to do the exact opposite with Bart. He goes overboard supporting him, which actually has consequences in of itself. Because Bart sucks at quarterback, his entire team hates him because he results in them losing. And on top of that, they're tired of his dad's favoritism of him, which puts Bart in a pretty, well, out-of-place predicament.
So if I play, the guys are gonna kill me. If I don't, I'll be letting Homer down. What am I gonna do?
That That is so rare for Bart. To actually care about not letting his dad down because his dad is giving him so much support, that's a really interesting shift for Bart. And I like that it's showing the problems of handing your child a glamorous position as a sign of support, and how there are other ways to show support for your kid with sports. How it's best to just let your kid play a position they're happy with and are good at, even if it's not the most glamorous position. Episodes like Doug on First also tackled that same topic, but I think The Simpsons worked theirs out a little bit better because they're instead showing how too much support can be just as much of an issue as no support. How giving too much support can make your kid fearful for letting you down and can put them through so much stress to get better, even if it's for something that's really just not in the cards for them. And like is typical of any good Simpsons episode, they get their message across in a way that's not only easy to follow, but loads of fun to watch.
I've got lots of quarters.
This thing only takes dollars.
Aww.
She's Got Game from the Proud Family. Like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of great football episodes out there that I haven't come across yet. But as of this moment, this one is my pick for the best football episode. Now, The Proud Family is yet another show I haven't talked about on my channel before, that I really should because there are a lot of positive things to talk about with this show, one of which being how progressive it was. And when most people bring up that point when discussing this show, this episode is usually a prime example of it. It's about Penny wanting to try out for the football team, but because she's a girl, the coach doesn't want her on the team, and this leads to a debate amongst a lot of the characters on if a girl should be allowed to play football with the boys.
Saying there's no pain like football pain.
Oh, yeah? What about childbirth?
Yeah, okay, childbirth is worse. But I'm not signing a permission slip for that either.
And eventually, a lawsuit is filed because of the unfair reasons Penny wasn't allowed to play on the team. Now, while I get why people view this as a progressive, let women play with the boys power message, I think it's actually a little bit deeper than that. I think it's actually trying to just be encouragement for girls to not be afraid of pursuing something they're actually good at, and also portraying gender equality in a slightly different light. First off, Penny doesn't want to join the team to be a leader or anything. She wants to join because she loves the sports. And while playing it with a group of boys, a boy she likes told her she couldn't handle playing the sport if it were full contact. And she just wanted to prove she could. And yeah, she's met with immediate sexism by a coach that's portrayed as very black and white. And even when she proves to him that she can play, he still doesn't put her on the team, and he's not very subtle about his prejudice.
The bad news? Everybody made the team. Good news? Everybody made the team but the girl.
But I was good. Nobody could stop me. Weren't you watching? How did I not make the team?
No girl is ever gonna play on my team. Now hit the road, sweetheart.
This is why it results in a lawsuit, because it's an unfair reason that's actually against the school's rules. And yeah, it turns into a media circus, but it was something that really didn't have to. Because the coach made his decision off of prejudice, that's why it became a much bigger deal. And that's why Penny was forced to fight. And more importantly, she proves it was worth fighting for. Not only does she end up excelling at something she enjoys, but she ends up inspiring others. But that's just the icing on the cake at this point. And that's what I think this episode is trying to push. To fight for something you know you can succeed in, not just because you want to set an example. That's what Bart Starr was somewhat implying to with its joke about Lisa joining the football team, clearly just to make a statement. That you're going to be crushed and maybe even make a fool of yourself if you go in assuming people aren't going to want you solely because you're a girl, especially if you clearly aren't even able to do the job you're trying to set out to do. Another thing I feel this episode is trying to say is, if someone is gifted at something like this, they shouldn't be held back from doing it because of their gender or race or anything minuscule that has absolutely nothing to do with their abilities. Bottom line, if you fight to do something you love and prove yourself at it, that's more likely to change people's minds. That's more likely to make a difference. And even if it doesn't change the world, it's still a step in the right direction. And at the end of the day, That's a personal victory no one can ever take away from you.
Oh, but you won so much more, Penny. You won so much more.
And that'll be it for this video and for my part of Toon Sports Week. If you guys want to see the other videos from Toon Sports Week, there'll be a link to those videos as well as to NICKtendo and C.R. Martin's channel in the description below, as well as a link to Shadowstreak and Cosmodore's channels since they'll be closing this week out. And that's not all. A few days ago, I did a collaboration with the Alpha J Show on one of our favorite episodes of Courage the Cowardly Dog. So along with the link to Toon Sports Week, there will be a link to that review as well as Alpha J's channel. And look forward to another collab with him sometime in the future on this channel. Anyway, thanks for joining us for Toon Sports Week, and I'll see you all in the next review when I continue my Amazing World of Gumball seasonal review.